Thanks for joining us today to talk about implementing DSS requirements 643 and 1161 for both merchants and service providers. I'm Martha Wilson, Director of Product Compliance for Global Payments, and in my role, I get to work across the entire product organization to ensure that we release software solutions that meet industry standards and best practices like PCI DSS. And with me today, I have Jason Greaves.
Hi, I'm Jason Greaves, Senior Director of the Merchant Protection Team at Global Payments. I'm responsible for helping all of our merchants with PCI DSS and all of their service providers and all of their requirements. So to get started, let's talk about script inventory and monitoring. So e-skimming is a cyber attack where malicious code is injected into e-commerce websites. It is one of the most common data breaches that the industry is seeing these days. So the PCI SSC Council created two new requirements in PCI DSS 4.0. Those requirements are 6.4.3 and 11.6.1. They're designed to help entities, businesses, merchants, service providers, all of them, to protect credit card data through credit card transactions that are being processed through e-commerce. So what is 6.4.3? That is a requirement that's designed to create an inventory of the merchant scripts that make the website work. Anything that is part of the website, whether it's the product selection, any of those items, all the way through to the payment transaction flow. So the merchant or the service provider, the entity, has to have an inventory of all of the scripts and understand that they are legitimate scripts, they know what they are, and they're authorized and needed for transactions. And 11.6.1 is monitoring those scripts ongoing, ensuring that they understand each script change and that it's authorized. Was it something that, the service provider or even the merchant's IT team, someone actually did intentionally? Or is it something from an unauthorized person who may have injected that malicious code? Martha?
Yeah, so Jason, thanks for going over what the standards are. So over the last kind of 2 years, we've all been a little bit challenged when we're talking about these new requirements and how we might implement a solution to meet them. So looking at both the merchant and the service provider side, we thought we'd start with kind of basic terminology because with 4.0, we had more clarification on what a service provider is. So looking at what a merchant is basically any entity that accepts payment cards bearing kind of the 4 logos or the big logos that participate in PCI. So with that, a service provider is a little bit different. They are not a payment brand directly involved in the processing, storage, or transmission of cardholder data. And they also can kind of access that card data or SAD data on behalf of another entity. So that includes global payments, like entities that process and have payment gateways that providers can connect to authorize transactions through that process. So this becomes more important as we're talking about these specific requirements because you're looking about how that responsibility for the 643 and those page scripts of 1161, what does that look like for a merchant versus a service provider that might be providing the actual page where those payments are being processed. So wanting to take dig in a little bit on kind of the responsibility breakdown. You guys have probably seen this table before, but wanted to highlight it because it creates an easy way to have a discussion around those different payment scenarios. The hardest part, I think, when you're looking at these requirements is trying to take that technical verbiage and implement it in a real life scenario. And how can you maybe mitigate or meet some of these requirements to help mitigate some of the security risk that comes with an e-commerce transaction? Because those bad actors are working every day to get to that information. So looking at kind of that embedded payment form or an iframe is probably the most common one that we think about when we think about these requirements or we talk about with these requirements. So looking at that merchant responsibility or a service provider, commonly known as that third-party service provider, you might have multiple TPSPs or service providers in this mix. So this table really helps you take a look at that. For example, an iframe, where you have a merchant that has a script on a web page that includes an iframe. Their responsibility are the scripts that are kind of connected to that page that has an iframe embedded, where the service provider is going to be really responsible for the actual scripts within the iframe and making sure that they're compliant with these DSS requirements. There are some instances as well where you have fully outsourced management of your website. From that perspective, we have solutions like that at Global where we have that fully outsourced responsibility where actually all of the ownership of meeting those requirements really fall to us as a service provider rather than to our merchants directly. And we help them by ensuring that we're meeting those requirements with the DSS. So now let's talk about actually meeting those requirements. Jason, do you want to take a merchant approach?
Yep. So the biggest thing the merchant needs to do is understand their scope. What are they responsible for? There's a lot of misconception that the merchant may not be responsible for whatsoever. Their service provider is responsible. However, they actually do have responsibilities for the scripts that maybe it's just a product selection. Then or they could also even go as far in depth as having servers within their environment that are housing these scripts, and they are responsible to ensure that they're meeting 643 and 1161. Selecting the right partner, selecting a tool that will be able to help them monitor all of these script changes and ensure they can identify what is legitimate and what is maybe an anomaly or a script that they're not familiar with. And then, of course, consulting with their QSA firm and with their acquirers. Martha, service provider?
Yeah, so a service provider is not going to be necessarily too different from a merchant, but maybe a higher level approach because you have to help your merchants ensure that they're compliant as well. So the first step when we're on a service provider looking at how to meet these requirements, you really want to determine your solution approach. Are we going to build something in-house so we can manage the requirements around an inventory? And how we do that, is that a part of our build and release process so we can build that inventory as we're releasing new product changes? Are we going to go with a third-party vendor that's going to really provide a solution that holistically helps us meet these new DSS requirements, specifically around page script monitoring? And that's something that each of us has to take a look at as a service provider and make the right choice. But once you've made that choice and determined that approach that you're going to take, it's really important to look at the new policies that are going to be required. No matter what approach you take, if you're using a third-party vendor to help meet those requirements or doing it in-house, you're going to have updated procedures that you're going to need to document, circulate, and ensure that everyone understands this, what is impacted and what how their role is impacted. So with that, defining that new policies and procedures become key to success once you've actually made a decision on how to move forward. And then the next step, again, is making sure that you understand the merchant impact and communicating that as well. As Jason alluded to, this can be kind of confusing as a merchant, ensuring that you understand your scope. As a service provider, it's our job to help our merchants understand their scope and ensure that they understand where their responsibilities start and where or stop and ours begin. And then lastly, wanted to talk about organizational alignment. When it comes to either a merchant or a service provider, organizational alignment becomes key to success as well. Because in order to have success, you have to have all these different factors. It can't just be one person advocating for something. You have to have kind of that buy-in as well. So that really building that buy-in starts with a business case. Make sure that you have that documentation around what you've decided to do, communicated, built out, and then from there you communicate that and get buy-in. We always say that compliance success starts from the top. You have to have a lot alignment from your leadership team to help build that success of whatever program you're trying to move forward. And that is no different with these new requirements with 643 and 1161. So building that buy-in and getting success from the top is really going to help you meet those PCI DSS requirements. And lastly, after you've got that buy-in, again, we're looking at an exercise in documentation and ensuring that you've got all of your audit procedures at timely updated. When you're implementing something new, as you go through that process, there's going to be refinement. There are going to be challenges that you have to work through. So ensuring that you're doing that ahead of time as you go into that audit process is really going to be key to success there as well. So, Jason, as we go through, I know we've spent about half of our time talking about all this information. I think we wanted to spend a lot of time on some key takeaways.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we mentioned on the previous slides, understanding your scope, ensuring that you have a clear understanding of what you're responsible for, what your service providers are responsible for, and how you're going to go through and manage those responsibilities. And one of the best things to do is selecting preferred partners. Identify a partner that has tools that will meet these requirements, that also meets your needs and helps you best protect your environment. Third-party processors, like Martha has mentioned, ensure that the TPSPs can that impact the security of that environment, and ensure they're PCI compliant, ensure that they have the right tools, ensure, as Martha alluded to previously, that they have a process in place and they have defined how they're approaching all of these new changes. And be vigilant. Ensure that you create processes, you create new policies that make sure you are following these steps, and don't let them slip. You always have to check when that tool identifies a script change. You always have to identify, do we know what this is? Don't assume that it was just routine maintenance. Ensure that it is a legitimate script change and isn't going to negatively impact the security of your environment.
Yeah, I like that you hit on that vigilant piece. That's important to have a conversation with your service providers to ensure that they have the same level of understanding that you do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Hopefully you found some information that'll help you with meeting those requirements.